Hello for the 22nd week in Ordinary Time, August 31, September 1. Chosen the book of Sirach and the Gospel from Luke, once again. And it's on humility. Now, maybe I'm not the best priest to give this homily on humility, but I'll try anyway. Humility. Series of quotes that I find very interesting. One is from the musician Elton John and what he said about our Pope Francis. In describing our Pope Francis, he said, Pope Francis is a miracle of humility in an era of vanity. A miracle of humility in an era of vanity. Pretty doggone good, I think. I like it. In the first reading from Sirach, a priest of the Old Testament, about 180 years before Christ. And he talks about humility. And he says, in today's reading, conduct your affairs with humility, and you will be loved more than a giver of gifts. Be humble, and people will love you more than they love somebody who gives gifts. Pretty doggone good, I think, for 180 years before Christ. The question is, what would you say humility is? Whom do you know that is probably the most humble person in your life? Or how would you define humility? I'm going to try to do it, at least the way I think, and I ask you to do it the way you think. Well, there's two other people that I find, and I read recently, to deal with humility. And one is, the younger people won't even know who he is probably, Groucho Marx. And I just read this and I thought, isn't that interesting? And it goes like this. Groucho Marx says, in this book of Everyday Greatness, he told the story of a nurse so taken with her own beauty that each time she took a man's pulse, she subtracted 10 points to compensate for what her looks did to his heart. I just think that nurse was not humble. Another one that hits close to home, I read this about, you remember the movie Roots? Alex Haley? That movie on television, 1976. And I read this relative to humility. It's a little bit more subtle, but equally as good. Haley remembered a lesson taught to him by his friend John Gaines, the local John R. Gaines here in Lexington. And he quotes John R. Gaines. He says this, if you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you know he had some help. Said Haley, anytime I start thinking, wow, isn't this marvelous what I have done? I look at that picture and remember how this turtle, me, got up on that post. I think that's clever. And he quotes the late John R. Gaines, And I thought, I wonder if that's the one that I know or knew. God rest his soul. So I called his wife, Joan Gaines. I says, did John ever know Huxley? Oh yeah, he used to write him, and he used to write him when he was on the boat making and writing his movies and so forth. Yeah. And yes, John did give that quote. Anytime I start thinking, well, isn't this marvelous what I've done, I think of that quote, if you see a turtle on top of a fence post, you know he had some help. Well, we have a lot of help. Humility. My definition of humility is truth. Humility, the word comes from humus, H-U-M-U-S. The Latin word means earth. If you are down to earth and you are truthfully yourself, your real personality, and you admit it and act that way, that's humility. You know, for example, if you happen to be handsome or if you happen to be beautiful, you don't go around and say, I'm not. Say, God has given me a nice body. Thank you, Jesus. And you're thankful that you're very pleasant looking. And that's humble, because it's the truth. You know, if you do something wrong and you violate somebody and you're wrong, and it's true, and you go back and say, I'm sorry, it's the truth. It's humiliating to say I'm sorry, but you're really a humble person. You know, humility has to do with the positive and the negative. Not this concept of false humility. Oh, I'm not any good, or it was an accident. I really didn't. I was lucky. You know, there's all kinds of reasons that we can say, I'm humble. Or the Germans and the Irish very often down people and put people down. You say, well, why'd you do that? Well, I want to keep them humble. Well, honey, you don't keep them humble. You get them depressed. What is truth is humble. And not all of this false concept of humility. In the gospel, Jesus talks about what place of honor do you take? Do you go to the high place seeking honor and glory and recognition, and then somebody knocks you down to the lower place, make room for somebody else? Or do you go to the lower place and then somebody pulls you up and says, sit up here closer, and you get some glory? But beware, a little bit of religion can be a dangerous thing. You can go to the place of honor, or you can go to the lowest place, so that somebody will bring you up the highest place, so that you get all the honor and the glory and so forth. And it's not humility. It's an exercise in self-aggrandizement, and is the opposite of humility. So don't misuse that quote. Jesus Christ wants us to be who we are, people of this earth. He wants us to be real. And when you are real and realize all the people that helped you, like the turtle getting up on the post, or when you acknowledge your weakness or sinfulness and ask for pardon, or when you are your true self, you really are humble. What's your definition of humility? Whom do you know that's the humblest person in your life? What is the essence of humility? We're all called to be real people. We're called to be humble people. And we're all called to give credit where credit is due. And for the most part, that's other people. It's our God. And just a minute. It's positive, accept it. It's negative, accept your own negativity and move on. You're humble. The devil was probably the most prideful, unhumble person. Because that's what the opposite of humility is pride. What do you think humility is? Whom do you know that is humble? Have a good day from this humble priest.